professor from year 1 of the education program. She teaches a course called, what is it, for Teaching for the Common Good? Is that what it's called?
Teaching for Diversity and the Common Good.
Yes, and it was a course that really inspired us, and Lori is one of our favorite professors. She has research interests that include teacher education, teacher professional identity, and the way that field experiences shape student teachers' understanding of their practice. She's also interested in teacher well-being, student transitions, as well as social justice and equity issues. Dr. Hill is a member of the editorial team for the papers on post-secondary learning and teaching, and her current service includes the National Board of the Canadian Association of the Study of Women. And we are so excited to have her here tonight to talk to us about building peace through a culturally responsive practice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry that I can't.
Oh, the volume.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you because I didn't have the volume up on my computer.
Oh, you sorted?
Thanks.
Sorry, I do have to remember to speak up. So if you can't hear me at any point, please let me know, and I will project my voice a little bit more towards the computer.
Sorry, that was my computer with the, I didn't have volume.
Okay. Shara, I want to thank you for that lovely introduction. I want to say that I'm really inspired by the work that you and Danica are doing with this group. It's a really meaningful and worthwhile endeavor at this point in time, especially during the pandemic. So thank you. There are going to be a lot of things when the pandemic is over to think about and consider as it relates to social justice, because the landscape will have shifted again, and we'll have to be really, really mindful and attentive to what is happening in our classrooms. So I have a PowerPoint here that I'd like to go through. I have some questions at the end that I thought we could direct our discussion toward. And because I wasn't able to upload this myself, I'm going to give a little wave to Danica every time I would like her to move the slide. So the title of my presentation is Building Peace Through a Culturally Responsive Practice. I have a really strong interest in issues related to social justice, and culturally responsive practice is a way to get at that particular goal or ambition that I have in the classroom and that any of you may have in the classroom. So Danica, we can move. I wanted to begin our talk tonight by framing it in this big picture way with the words of Jackie Seidel. This is from her article, A Curriculum of Miracles. It's an older article now, but it resonates still. So the next slide, we won't move yet, but the next slide talks about in a little bit more detail what she is saying. But if I read this, life can be open from this place called a classroom or a school, or it can be closed. This is our mandate. We want to open our classroom to the lives of our students. We want to bring life into the classroom for them. So thanks, Danica. So this is from her article. Many experiences as a teacher taught me that children's lives matter now, and if there is any truth in the world, this is the one I learned to hold near to my heart. Our fragile human lives are not in the future. A curriculum for miracles knows that life always unfolds from here and now, from this moment lived well with generosity and goodness. It does not waste children's time, and it understands that each moment is important for its own time. This curriculum has no time to make children feel bad about themselves, about who they are, about their capacities as human beings. It only has time for having love, for being creative, for full and whole days of living life. So that's our framework for the discussion. We can move to the next slide. This is my essential question. How can we employ culturally responsive teaching practices in order to educate for peace? Next slide. So in order to get at that question, we need to think about that whole idea and that theory of culturally responsive, and I would say culturally relevant pedagogy as well. Culturally responsive teaching means that we are teaching to and through the strengths of a child's culture. We are validating and affirming the child by using the child's cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles so that the learning experiences are effective and relevant. Culturally responsive teaching recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. And because of this particular approach, we know that we will be grappling with issues of marginalization, powerlessness, privilege, oppression. Culturally relevant and responsive teaching is planning a lesson that invites the student into the learning process because it's meaningful for them, because it's relevant to their lives. Culturally responsive teaching is responding to each class, student, or situation differently based on the culture likes and dislikes of that person and group. And this is why it is very, very important to know your students and to have a relationship with them. It is hard to be culturally relevant without having a relationship with your students. You need to know what your students listen to, what they watch, what they want to learn, what they're doing in their lives. The most meaningful learning for students comes from the relationship that you have with them. That's true for me in my teaching, and it will be true for you in your teaching, no matter the grade level, no matter the division. So in our own teaching, policy and curriculum are absolutely important. They are one of the things, curriculum, the teacher, the student, those are kind of the three foundations upon which our practice rests. So policy and curriculum are important, but these elements cannot be a substitute for the awareness and sensitivity on the part of ourselves. We are committed to do what can be done in our classroom spaces at this time of year to acknowledge, honor, and to include our students' cultural identities. So I think everybody here probably believes that this is very, very important. This is one of the common elements that you all have that you all share in common. But let's just look at overall why this is important, some things that we might not have considered. Knowing and learning about classmates and teachers' cultural backgrounds and family and traditions at the beginning of the school year can reduce, and that should be fear, and it can increase empathy. So if you do that early on, build that into your relationship with your students, that can help to build the community in the classroom. Lessons that allow students to explore and share aspects of their identities, including their religious and cultural traditions, help them become cognizant of and interested in the similarities and differences that exist all around them. As they learn more about themselves, they're more interested, better prepared to learn about others. Cultural responsive teaching can help students see that differences among them make for better learning overall. So I wanted to share some of my assumptions quickly that kind of frame what we're talking about here this evening. I believe that a culturally responsive practice is bound up in modeling relationships between students. It is inclusive, it is respectful. As teachers, I think you care about social justice issues. Teaching is personal. It's a personal and political act. And I have included a quote by Kelly and Menes Brandeis. We agree that teaching is inevitably political and that teachers cannot be value neutral. So they would argue that even when you do not comment on something that is of particular significance to the students' lives in your classroom, that is a message that you are conveying. Students have the ability to judge and consider for themselves new ideas and experiences in terms of right or wrong when they are given the opportunity to have experiences, to discuss ideas, to participate in dialogue and reflection. So it's not always, not necessarily helpful to withhold these big ideas from our students, but rather to develop and introduce them in a kind of age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate way. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil close by, could you please take it out and take a minute to think about what you believe about different cultures and ethnicities and races, whether you hold certain stereotypes, how those stereotypes may affect the way you interact with your students, and if you have different standards for different students because of these biases. I'm not going to ask you to share any of these. These are for your eyes only. They're personal, but it's something that I want you to think about now, just as we start to get into some examples of how we can engage in culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. So I'll stop talking for a minute and let you think. Okay, just another minute. Okay, let's come back together and just keep those thoughts that you have recorded in the back of your mind. Remember that all of us come into our public spaces, into our work, with a particular set of values, assumptions, beliefs. We are, none of us, value neutral, but the really important thing is that we begin to recognize what those biases are, and then we can work with them. So Danica, we can move. So I have listed here 4 ways that we can begin to honor students' cultural identities. not just at this time of year, of course, but throughout the year. The pillars of instruction that are suggested here are ones that you will all be familiar with. Building a safe classroom community, a trusting classroom community that is more important now than ever. And even though many or most of you are working in an online environment, students will be drawn to and will benefit from any sense of community that you can create for them. Dialogue is really, really important, ongoing, consistent, fair, inclusive. That should be a standard for you in your teaching practice. The third one, practice a range of instruction, assessment, and evaluation strategies. And those are things that you're taking up in your methodology classes and that many of you will have seen in action when you've been in practicum. The last one, experiential activities, I've italicized because that's what I'm going to mainly focus on in the next little bit of our talk. Experiential activities are the best. That is how students really, really learn in the most meaningful way. So anytime that you can give your students a shared experience, you're doing something really valuable for them. Slide. So I'm going to, I'm touching in the first few slides on a safe community. And then I'm sharing a few books on dialogue, the importance of that. And then I'm going to move into other ways that are experiential in nature that you can approach some of your practice in the class. And a lot of this is going to be framed through books because books are a really accessible way to give your students a common experience. It's a powerful way. And I hope that each of you have the opportunity in your practicum to read to your students in a regular, ongoing way, even if they're in junior high and high school. So a safe and trusting classroom community, the book that I have here is Our Class is a Family. Teachers do so much more than just teach academics. They build a sense of community within their classrooms, creating a home away from home where they make their students feel safe, included, and loved. And just before I go on, I need to recognize one of my first year students, Andy Radis, who in her interactive notebook assignment shared for each entry that she did a number of books that spoke to the particular theme of the reading for that week. So I took some from her amazing work. So I'm not sure if she's here, but I really, really was grateful for her thinking on that. So dialogue, that was the second pillar that we mentioned. And this book, The Day You Begin, is about understanding that while you as a student or some of the students in your class may feel marginalized, they may feel not recognized or seen, they may feel alone, that if they can be brave and step out and take that first step, that others are always or usually more than happy to meet them at that space. So the last one in terms of being inclusive in our talk with our students, in being fair and in being respectful, is this story. Something happened in our town. Follows two families, one white, one black, as they discuss a police shooting of a black man in their community. The story aims to answer children's questions about such traumatic events and to help children identify and counter racial injustice in their own lives. So this is a developmentally appropriate text for younger students, but it will still require a great deal of support on your behalf in terms of introducing these big ideas. And I wanted to give you this image of hands in an art installation in the main hallway of a school. The school was celebrating an anniversary, and every child's hand at that time in that year was modeled onto this huge board. It's done with, I think, a plaster of Paris. So that's a kind of, that's an artifact, isn't it, of community, of really a sense of everyone belonging. So experiential activities, remember that sense of experience is the most powerful way that students have of learning. By doing things with their hands, by listening to and responding to in their own words to texts or to films or to some art or to an outdoor experience that they've had. That's the most powerful. So I've listed some of the ways that we can do this: reading books, listening to music, viewing films, creating art, engaging with students at other schools, and engaging with community members within the school community. So books, you heard me mention that books is one of the most powerful and meaningful ways to engage your students, and that's because there can be many voices represented in books, and the images that are provided in the books allow the students to see themselves. What we want to do is to have a range of literature where every child in your class can see themselves represented in text. Kelly states that the exploration and articulation of alternative narratives is essential for the establishment of critical thinking in young children. And we know that when you're thinking critically, that you're analyzing new ideas and experiences from more than one perspective. So it allows them to challenge what's happening in the text. It allows them to challenge or to confirm what's happening in the world. It allows them to confirm or challenge an experience that they've had in their own lives. It also allows them to gain an understanding on issues and ideas that they may not have encountered in a kind of an organic way otherwise. And I think that's part of our job, is to provide experiences, to provide opportunities to talk about things that they will not have the opportunity to do in other parts of their lives. So some books, some really powerful books. This is called Tree of Cranes, and you can see that it is a holiday themed book. It's about a young Japanese boy and the decorating of the tree with origami cranes. Beautiful story. This story, The Christmas Coat, Memories of My Sioux Childhood. In this story, Virginia needs a new coat and hopes she'll find one amongst the used clothing in the East boxes, sent to the Episcopalian church on the reservation where her father is the priest. As readers turn the page, they'll see a mix of Sioux and Christian ways of being. The three wise men in the nativity wear headdresses. Just an angel just like me. So this is about a young boy named Tyler who wonders why all the Christmas tree angels he sees represented are blonde-haired and have pink cheeks. Aren't there any black angels, he asks, but no one can answer him. So Santa in this story has a surprise. And this story tackles issues of race and gender. Three Wise Women. Because of the time of year that we're in, I wanted to include something that was kind of pertinent to the holiday season. This is called Three Wise Women. It's about three women in three very different corners of the world who respond to the star in the sky and meet and come together. And the gifts that they have to give aren't tangible things, but things from the heart. And I wanted to mention finally the winter solstice. One of my former students said that her school conducted throughout the weeks leading up to the solstice and up to Christmas, a kind of investigation and inquiry into the solstice. So this book includes tales from around the world that mark that winter day when the sun is not with us for the least amount, or the sun is with us for the least amount of time for this particular year. So I wanted to move next into some art projects, and projects that can be linked to developing a concept of social justice with our students. So I found this idea online. And so the I is not me, the I is the teacher in this particular article that I saw. So she began to formulate, after considering this concept, that students should choose a charity, and in exchange for a donation, wishes could be written by her students on paper airplanes to be displayed in sculptures or hanging from trees around the school and the school community. So when you're doing something like this, this is a large project. And this requires a great deal of support, again, and preparation on your part as the teacher. So you're helping the student to understand what the concept of giving is and how that's sometimes embodied in a formal charity, and talking about people, depending on the charity you identify, what the particular needs that the charity is trying to meet, and then identifying how do you want to structure this in terms of your art project. It could go in any direction at all, but this is what they chose to do. So this is another one. This is from the States, and there is an engineering company that issues a nationwide competition or call for students to participate in builds to use art and structural engineering to collect food for local food. So I wanted to include this picture because I found it, this is in the hallway of I think it's in a high school, but I found it really, really remarkable. So I wanted to include that here. And this is from the Vancouver School Board. And right now this art installation is sitting at their, well, maybe not at this moment, but it has been sitting in the school board's main office. And it stays on exhibit for people from the public to come in and view. So this group of students was organizing themselves toward recycling to waste. You can see your organic waste in the top left-hand corner of the slide. So it's talking about, the study is about how our oceans are impacted by pollution. So another example that I found online was mask making. And this engages students in thinking about other cultures, how other cultures use masks that reflect their beliefs and their values, that demonstrate a particular way of life. Students were given time to create their own masks showing their own culture, their own likes, and their own values. Now, this teacher, she was an art teacher, and she spent a great deal of time having experts come in and talk about the masks and share background information with the students so that they weren't creating these masks in a vacuum, but had a repertoire of knowledge, of understanding in order to support this art project. So I included this quote by the curator at the Bill Reid Center at Simon, please excuse my spelling errors here, Simon Fraser University. We can only begin to understand and appreciate masks when they are contextualized by the authority of a native voice. So this is really, really important for us to remember, that we do not take these very, very significant markers of identity and a culture for ourselves into our practice without a recognition of where they came from and what they mean. And that entails us, to have someone from that particular culture come and speak to us about it and allow us that opportunity to learn about them. So in this assignment, students were asked, once they had all of this background knowledge, they were to include 3 personality traits, hobbies, or favorite things on their masks. They had to be things that they could explain and rationalize later to the teacher. There had to be 3-dimensional elements on the mask, things that popped out so that they weren't just flat in nature. They had this kind of topography to them. Students had to title their masks, and they were also asked to identify a song that if they were to perform with the mask, that they would dance to this particular song. And then they needed to answer in a reflective kind of writing piece why they had made these particular decisions. So the goals of the project were to teach students about how cultures use masks in performances, to compare differences and similarities between these cultures and their own culture, and to construct a visual representation of their own cultural identity. To accomplish this, students viewed videos, learned about masks, and constructed their own masks using paper mache. The major goal of this assignment was to engage students in learning about other cultures, specifically Indigenous people in this particular case. So these are some of the symbols that and what they meant that the teacher shared with her students. So I included one of the students' work. This is a middle school student, and this is what her mask embodied. 3 things that she used to identify herself. Water, because she loves swimming. The loon, because it symbolizes peace and tranquility. The land and earth, because she loves running. The song she chose was Eat. And then she talked about why, and the words in the orange are from the song itself. It's like forgetting the words to your favorite song. You can't believe it. You were always singing along. It was so easy and the words so sweet. You can't remember. You try to feel the beat. And then the student said, I feel like I've changed so much in junior high compared to elementary. And sometimes I feel like I can never be that person again. But now I'm more mature and in control of my life. Also, because the loon is standing on the brink of the water, it symbolizes transition and change. So finally, in terms of experiential activities, engaging with others. This is most rewarding for you as a teacher and for the students. So if it's possible, connect with students at other schools, students attending different language schools, different religiously based schools, students at international schools, within your local area or across the country or even internationally. Create texts that show commonalities and differences, always being respectful of the amazing possible ways to look at the world. And I've included another book here just as a resource. Also engaging with other, if we can kind of think back, this is an echo of the winter solstice. And I thought it would be a perfect time to talk about food, about farming, how the sun affects what we grow and eat. It's a way to get into climate change, perhaps. And have students participate in a potluck gathering by contributing seasonal and local products, if that's something that's feasible in your classroom. It can involve parents as well, could link to other classrooms in the school. Use classroom experiences about the holidays as an opportunity to dig deeper. We don't want any of our endeavors, our initiatives to be surface. We always want to dig deep, go beyond how, when, and where people celebrate to why they celebrate, and the many different ways that they celebrate even within the same tradition. Avoid monolithic representations of groups by exposing students to the lived experiences of real people, allowing them to read personal narratives, interact with guest speakers, and interview community members. Explore the diversity within diversity. Students gain a deeper knowledge of culture, history, geography, literature, art, music, and more when they can do this. The goal is for students to begin to see religious and cultural differences as normal, as interesting. You're always going, when you're doing this kind of work, you're always going to want to communicate with and collaborate with parents. So talk to your parents about any plans that you have to kind of move a little bit outside of the curriculum to talk about particular holidays and practices and beliefs, explain the goals of the lesson, and emphasize that it's there just for them to be made aware of, to think carefully about, that it's not to indoctrinate them. And this is an area where the support of your administration is helpful and sometimes essential. So be prepared to answer questions, to allay concerns. Some family members may be willing to speak to the class about their traditions and share primary sources. Such presentations can bring the lesson to life and are entirely appropriate as long as they are non-devotional and family members are asked to speak from their own experiences, not as spokespersons for the particular group or aspect of their identity that they are talking about. Celebrate everything. One way to relieve the pressure of December is to look beyond it, educating students about various religious holidays at various times of the year. So I've mentioned the Ramadan, the Islamic celebration, Diwali, Hanukkah. These are, and there will be many, many more, but where you want to look for the source of what to celebrate is to your students. See what their backgrounds are, think about their identities, and then plan accordingly. So finally, when you're doing this kind of work, ask students to perform at a high level. Give them the skills, the support, the background information so that they can do this, and make it culturally relevant and meaningful. This should never be busy work. Nothing that happens in our classroom should be busy work. So the first step, before we get into our discussion, the first step for doing any of this is personal. As I teach, I project the condition of my soul onto my students, my subject, and our way of being together. This is from Parker Palmer. And if you were in the first year course with me, Teaching for Diversity in the Common Good, you would have read this article that this quote came from. But this quote really, really speaks to the kind of disposition that we're speaking to tonight about social justice. The first step comes from you. You want to be culturally responsive. That is, you can see yourself in other people's cultures. You want to be multicultural, and that is that you have an understanding that the various ethnicities and languages and so on, identities of our students that we have in our classroom, particularly if they are marginalized identities, they deserve acknowledgement. They deserve recognition. So that first step is for you to think about your own belief system and values. So this is our question. I only have 2 slides on questions. This is one of them. What is your comfort level about the holidays and how they should be celebrated in your classroom? What are your concerns, if any? So Danica and Shara, I'm not sure how you normally do discussions. Do people want to just express and speak out?
Yeah, so thank you, Lori. You're amazing. It's so nice to hear from you. And thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, especially sharing those resources of books. I know books are a gateway to conversations and whatnot, so I really appreciate that. Yeah, so normally